All right, Scott. The number one most important thing in a crisis.
Number one most important thing in a crisis is being prepared beforehand. You have to do risk assessments to know where your vulnerabilities lie, and you have to be proactive in both getting out positive information before something occurs to help shape the narrative, and also to be ready for rapid response. The crisis is not a time to put your crisis management strategy together. It's well before something happens to be sure that you are strategic, prepared, and ready to go.
I love that. Mine is fire insurance.
Kevin, when have you found that a crisis can actually be an opportunity for an organization to get their narrative out into the media and to the public?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the scale of the crisis, obviously. If there's a scandal or something like that, I think at that point you're just playing defense. But when there's an opportunity for your organization to get out there and say something in the middle of a crisis communications thing, whatever it happens to be, that is, I agree. I think that's a real opportunity. But I think that there's a couple of things that people need to keep in mind when they're thinking through their crisis communication planning. And I completely agree with you. I think having the plan beforehand is absolutely critical, because if you don't have that, you don't have a crisis comms department, essentially. But I think it's really like thinking through speed versus accuracy. I would say a lot of organizations, in my experience, get what we call analysis paralysis, is they are so frozen by the moment that they're unable to move. And really, perfection is the enemy of credibility in a crisis. It's critical. You need to get something out fast that anchors your values. You know, you can always clarify, but you can't make up for silence. So I would say that's probably the top thing when you are thinking through the opportunities in a crisis, is knowing that speed is a little more important than accuracy. But I think your point to having a plan is excellent.
Yeah, I think what I found is that when you do make a decision in a crisis to go out and make a statement, it needs to be complete, right? Because the more that you have to go back and update it, the more that gives a reporter an opportunity to update a story and to continue the news cycle. I think that understanding what information is available and what you can share and getting it all out at once, I think can be really helpful. I also think that one of the key things is that a crisis is not the time to have to build reporter relationships from scratch. It's important for them, it's important to be responsive when there is not a crisis, so that they know that they can come to you and that you can have some of those off the record conversations. I also think one of the more important things in a crisis is to perform a tabletop drill beforehand. And I think that the preparation, just to know who's in the approval chain, to know what telephone numbers there are, and to have them on a hard copy somewhere, so that if the email is down, if there's a cyber attack and you're not able to get to your computer, I think just having these basic pieces of information that help you actually operationalize your response are a really important part of getting it right when it really matters.
I feel as though people, when they think of crisis communications, it kind of hits them with fear. They're just, I don't know what we would do. Where the way that you put it was great, because it's this idea that, look, you prepare for a crisis at home. You prepare for, a crisis if there's an earthquake or a fire or whatever it happens to be. You practice your tornado drills if you live in a tornado-prone area. It's the same thing with your business, with your organization, with your company, is you prepare for the crisis. And you have a plan ready to go, and you go through the drills. You have a fire drill at school or at work, and you do the same thing. You have your variation, or whatever your version is, of a fire drill.
And it's important to remember that when you're responding to a crisis, the getting it wrong can have effects that last for months, for quarters, for years, right? The reputational harm, if it's a publicly traded company, investors are going to feel the pain. It could impact the way that an organization recruits top talent. It could really affect the reputation of an organization in any number of ways for years to come. So showing that, I think, you are able to take accountability and then respond quickly to really mitigate any inaccurate information and to try to shape the narrative and move beyond it as quickly as possible, I think is important. One of the things that I've done with companies is truly just creating hidden websites that are ready to go for some of the key areas that could be vulnerabilities, so that there is something ready that has contact information, that has potential Q&As, and where you can put a statement up and not having it live online, right? But just having it ready so that you're responding in the most timely way possible.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, I think through what happens in the political world here is, the thing that we like to live by is if you're not shaping the narrative, someone else is. And this is so critical in those in the immediacy after a crisis. Accuracy definitely matters, but I would say your presence matters more, and being able to come in and shape the story as quick as possible is even more critical than just kind of ensuring that you get it right. I would say crisis response is 70% trust, but like 30% facts. There's this idea of, the trusted messenger, and if you're saying something with confidence, you don't have to be 100% accurate, especially if something is still developing. You take the information that you have, that you're prepped with, to your point, and you come out with it in a strong, consistent, confident way, and you're able to shape the narrative, I think, at that point.
Yeah, and I think one of the more important things to remember, too, is that you don't have to be the person speaking in a crisis. That's when alliance building, it's when your third-party validators can come in a really important way and speak on your behalf. I think that thinking through who the voices are that are going to make the most sense and be most trusted, to your point, is a really good thing to think through. And like we've been saying, you can't think through that in a crisis. That has to be relationships. It has to be trust that's built up over time when you have something to offer, not when it's just when you need something in return.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's something that I don't think we talk about enough. You develop the relationships beforehand. I think there's this idea that in a crisis, because it's a big opportunity, like we said at the top of this, that you're going to be able to develop those relationships with reporters or whoever in real time, and you can't. That's not really an option. You do need to be doing the legwork behind the scenes and prior to it. It's having the plan, it's having the desk side presentation or the desk side run through, and then, or the tabletop run through, and then it is having those relationships that you have established over weeks or months or years beforehand ready to go, so you can call up a reporter and say, hey, I have a quick statement. Hey, I want to talk about this. It's again controlling the narrative, but having done all the legwork. I think I've heard a lot in my career of just this idea of like, well, we have to control the narrative. It's like, sure, yes, I agree, but there is a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, and I think that sort of as we live in the age that we do, a lot of crises exist now that might not have even been on the table 5 years ago, right? Like you see, not only is an organization at risk, but its board members can be at risk. Its leadership are at risk in personal ways. And with social media, with the online world, it's really important not to just prepare your organization, but also to prepare and be looking out for those people that are important to your organization. I think you can think through groups that have conferences, right? Like knowing that there could be protests there, knowing that there could be issues depending upon what the topic is. I think those are important things to think through. Any discussion of crisis communications, it's important to note that avoiding the crisis at the first place is the best way to prevent it from happening. And that involves risk assessments. It involves coming up with great plans with workbooks that ideally you'll never need, right? Yes. I mean, some of the best work that we've done is in a drawer somewhere and on a computer somewhere ready to go, but ideally it might not even have to be used.
Yeah, it sounds trite, but it really is that the best offense is a good defense, and that is I think that's the pinnacle of what you were just talking about right now.
A crisis is not the time to have to build reporter relationships.
Perfection is the enemy of credibility in a crisis.
A lot of crises exist now that might not have even been on the table 5 years ago, right?
You know, you can always clarify, but you can't make up for silence.